I appreciate the fact that people slog through rain and traffic to get here, and I welcome you all. This is our 144th annual meeting, and let's start by standing and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome all our members who have joined us here today, and recognize Gordon England, Paul Ignatius. I think Sean O'Keefe is here. We just saw Dr. Hamry. All the board members here from our board of directors, our editorial board, foundation board, and our Naval History Advisory Board who have joined us. Welcome to all our guests, and it's also good to see several uniforms in the audience, flag and general officers and others. And we very much appreciate you joining us here for the annual meeting. I'm going to introduce our chairman of the board, Jim Stavridis. As you know, Admiral Stavridis served a very distinguished 30-plus year career, which culminated in his being the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. He was the most prolific active duty contributor to proceedings. He's also published 6 books with the Naval Institute Press. He now serves as the Dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Please welcome our chair, Jim Stavridis.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, welcome so many personal friends from so many different parts and days of my life. It's wonderful to see all of you. I could spend an hour and 45 minutes just recognizing friends here. So I'll stipulate that this is a gathering that warms my heart enormously. I look forward to seeing you at the reception after this excellent meeting and greeting so many folks personally. As I look around the world today and I think about the Naval Institute, now more than ever, what we do here matters. And if you allow me to use a mariner's compass, I'll say north, south, east, and west. To the north, the Arctic. I am a mariner. I will not try and define science for us, but I will tell you a fact. The polar ice is melting. It will open geopolitical competition, and it will drive events in that Arctic Sea. South, we see Venezuela exploding. We see on maritime transit zones continuing flow of drugs to our nation. Yesterday I was with my very dear friend, retired Marine General John Kelly. We had a long talk about the maritime aspects of what he does at Homeland Security and our shared time as Commander of Southern Command. I assure you this world to the south is alive and vibrant and is a maritime world. To the east, we see a resurgent Russia most definitively, although Russia operates globally. We see them in the Atlantic. We had forgotten the acronym GIUK, GAP. Now we remember it. We see the Mediterranean again filling with ships, especially the Eastern Mediterranean, which in so many ways resembles the tensions we see in the South China Sea. We see the Islamic State, the flow of refugees, 2 million to Europe in the last 3 years, all of it flowing across these oceans. And to the west, to the Pacific, where our Navy, our Marine Corps, our Coast Guard, our merchant fleet has operated for so long. We are a Pacific nation in so many ways. There we see the rise of China. We seek and we will avoid the Thucydides trap, rising power, declining power. But we must deal together, for example, with North Korea. We have to stand strongly with our allies in Japan and South Korea and Australia and New Zealand and the Philippines and Thailand. These are treaty allies we have. So north, south, east, and west, we see a world full of challenge, full of opportunity, and indeed a maritime world. I'm proud to be the chairman of the board. I love these annual meetings because we have the opportunity to recognize so many young and senior scholars and thinkers who dare to think, to read, to write, to publish. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, this year's annual meeting is made possible with the generous support of USAA and Leonardo DRS. And Leonardo DRS is represented here today by Joe Militano, who's a Senior VP for Communications and Public Affairs, and by Mike Coulter, who's the President of their International Business Development at Leonardo. Let's thank our sponsors quickly. Per our bylaws, we have to make required reports. So here, very quickly, in about 30 seconds, is the required reports. Membership was up in 2016 for the 5th straight year. We finished 2016 with over 51,000 members. Overall, the Institute was in the black for the 4th straight year, and we're positive over $500,000, and this helps sustain our efforts. We are making tremendous progress on our mission goals in our strategic plan. So those are the required reports. Our Board of Directors, another required report is to give the election results. And our Board of Directors are elected for 3-year terms. And as you can see up there, we've listed our Board of Directors who have done tremendous service for the Institute. Elected this year is Admiral Jim Stavridis, Admiral Tim Keating, Captain Carl Haslinger, Mr. John Morton, who's here today, and Captain Gordon Van Hook. So we're all thrilled also to have the news that Fred Kacher was selected for flag. And when Fred pins on, we'll probably lose him because the lawyers will capture him. But Fred has done an amazing job leading our Young Leaders Group, and we thank him. We also have 3 active duty board advisors, and I think it's important to know that the Navy, the Marines, and the Coast Guard each send 1 active duty flag or general officer. And we say goodbye to Rear Admiral Pete Brown, U.S. Coast Guard, who's going off, not bad, to command the 7th Coast Guard District in Miami. So that's a plum, a terrific operational command. And we welcome his relief, Rear Admiral Jack Vogt. And we're very glad to have Jack. And we first met Jack when we started our efforts to do a history conference up at the Coast Guard Academy in New London. And he's been a terrific help to us already before he even served. We're welcoming Rear Admiral Jim Loeblein to the board. He's done 1 meeting so far, but he's relatively new to the board. He's the Chief of Legislative Affairs, and we're very glad to have Jim on board as a Navy advisor. Thank you, Jim. And finally, we have Chris Owens, who's been our Marine Corps advisor, and Chris is going to be leaving us soon. But we want to thank Chris for his service at many different levels and his strong contribution. Thank you. Okay, for the editorial board, they are elected each year. They do amazing work to provide peer review of all the article submissions to proceedings. And we thank our departing Ed Board members, Lieutenant Commander Grant Thomas, U.S. Coast Guard, Commander Micah Murphy, U.S. Navy, and Lieutenant Commander Amy McGrath, who departs after June, for their superb service. We also welcome our new Ed Board members, which include Fleet Master Chief Paul Kingsbury, who was last year's 3rd prize winner in the General Prize Essay Contest and a recent winner in the Enlisted Essay Contest sponsored by Textron. And also we welcome Commander Brian Smiklis, U.S. Coast Guard, who was last year's Proceedings Author of the Year. So 2 phenomenal additions to the Ed Board. And I'd like to ask all the members of our Board of Directors, advisors, and Ed Board who are here today just to stand up and be recognized. We announced earlier this year that General Pete Pace, U.S. Marine Corps retired, has succeeded Gordon England as chair of our foundation. Our trustees and foundation staff had a phenomenal result in 2016. They raised over $5 million against a target of $3.775 million. So they overachieved, and we are very grateful for that. We also have a new initiative, just to put this bee in your bonnet, that we have a new initiative to be more inclusive and take counsel from experienced historians, and we've set up and we had our first meeting this afternoon of a Naval History Advisory Board. And you could see the type of people, the quality of people that we have on our advisory board. It was a terrific meeting today. And I'd like to ask very quickly all our foundation trustees, including Gordon, who's emeritus, and Naval History Advisory Board members to stand and be recognized if you're here in the audience tonight. With us tonight, as you just heard, is Gordon England. And Gordon, I ask you to join me at the podium, please. And as Gordon's coming up, we've previously announced late last year that Gordon England has a chair, the chair of Professional Naval Literature, named in his honor. Far and away, last year was our best year. Gordon's done tremendous service for us. But this chair directs the Professional Naval Books Program for the Institute, furthers the strategic initiative to become the preeminent source of information for our naval professionals, and also provides a focal point. You know, we've talked about this last year, that the Naval Institute goes as the press goes, and the press goes as the professional naval books go. Now, Gordon led the Navy itself as Secretary of the Navy 2 times, and during a very consequential period. And I got a chance to work for him there, and frankly, his leadership inspired me at a time when I needed inspiration for senior DoD civilians. And the new chair will help ensure his name continues to inspire naval professionals for generations to come. And we're all delighted that Commander Tom Cutler, U.S. Navy retired, longtime Naval Institute press editor and author, is the chair's incumbent. Please join me in recognizing in public for the first time Gordon England for this prestigious chair.
So, Pete, thank you very much. And Tom Cutler, I'm proud that you are the first person to hold the chair. So I'm really, really pleased and proud that you're holding the chair. My good friend, Admiral Jim Stavridis, thanks for your terrific remarks. I'm just going to add one thing to your remarks, by the way. Jim always has this terrific view of the world, but one reason I'm stepping down is because I was elected chairman of the National Academy of Engineering. I've been a member for some time. So I look around the world, one thing I think about is this dramatic change that's going on in technology. And it causes me to think that technology changes about every 6 months, but cultures are generational. You know, cultures change very, very slowly, and I think there's a lot of disruption going on in the world, and I think there's going to be a lot more disruption in the world, in the country, as technology really grabs hold. And I mean, AI, I think, is a misnomer. It's not artificial intelligence, it's going to be intelligence. And it's going to affect everything we do, along with lots of other technologies. And I think even a country like the United States will have trouble adjusting. So, and I think we've already seen some of that. Anyway, something you might think about, I think it's going to be very difficult times for leadership. And I think it's more and more important we have organizations like the Naval Institute. First of all, history is important. It is an indicator the past is an indicator of what the future is going to be, and the Institute does a terrific job of capturing our history, particularly our naval history, but also our proceedings and our technology and our leadership and everything that the Institute does. I think Jim's absolutely right. It's more and more important, along with institutions where we are right now, John Hamre and his CSIS. So it's going to take a lot of people thinking. It's going to take a lot of people with experience, a lot of people with leadership skills as we go forward. And U.S. Naval Institute is very, very germane in all of those areas. So, Pete, I want to thank you for your personal leadership. This institute has done astonishingly well under Pete Daly. So, Pete, I congratulate you on your good work. And, Jim, I thank you for your leadership and all the And so Jim talked about all these young talent. Well, I'm definitely not in that category. I'm emeritus. I am going to be around, so I'm not active on the board, but you will see me lots of times with the Institute, because every opportunity I have, I will still continue to participate in Institute activities. So, Pete, thank you very much. It's very, very nice of you and the board to provide me this honor, and I thank you very much, and a pleasure to be here. And then I apologize, I need to leave because I have a National Academy of Engineering board meeting. It's going to start in about 20 minutes, and I need to be at that board meeting. Thank you all very much. Pete, thanks.
Okay. Well, we'll ask Admiral Stavridis to come up in just a moment, but it's my honor to announce today, for the first time, that we have established the James Stavridis Proceedings Chair. And this chair will ensure that we continue to progress toward one of the most important objectives of the Institute, which is to identify the important topics and foster useful discussions on those issues, emboldening contributors, increasing the dare factor, and frankly, improving Proceedings Magazine each and every month to take on the tough issues. Admiral Jim Stavridis truly embodies the Naval Institute. I mentioned earlier that he dared to write for Proceedings at every commissioned rank. He's published over 40 articles and comment and discussion pieces in the magazine. He's published the 6 books with the Naval Institute Press. I'm also pleased to tell you that Fred Rainbow will be the first incumbent for the new Stavridis chair. And about a year ago, Fred returned to Proceedings as our editor-in-chief, and he brings intelligence, energy, and passion back to that position and leads a new editorial team. This past year was Fred Rainbow's 21st total year as being editor of Proceedings. So a little story that goes behind that. In 1975, Midshipman Stavridis asked a young Proceedings editor, assistant editor, for advice on the midshipman publication, The Log. And that editor, Fred Rainbow, fresh from the fleet, told Jim he'd help Midshipman Stavridis if Jim would agree to engage in the forum. So 40 years hence, it's only fitting that we name this chair in honor of Jim Stavridis, and the first incumbent is Fred Rainbow. Jim, would you join us on the stage, please?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to comment on the rogue slideshow behind us, which has been sort of randomly moving along, and I'd like to publicly attribute it to a Chinese cyber attack. It's been on my mind since I was testifying this morning over in the Senate in front of the SASC with Senator McCain and his merry band. And so I think we're seeing a little manifestation of that. But I think it has landed on the perfect slide, for me anyway, at this moment, which is simply to say thank you. You have told the story of my association with the Proceedings. I will simply add that to the degree I've been able to be helpful in this enormous maritime conversation over the last 40 years, I'm proud of that. There have been times when I would publish an article and be assured the day after the issue came out that, Stavridis, your career is over. I was told that by a 3-star in the E-ring when I was a lieutenant commander. I was told that by a 4-star in the E-ring when I was a 1-star. Somehow I slipped through the cracks. Probably another computer error of some kind. In any event, I believe with all my heart in this idea of writing, publishing, sharing ideas, because we challenge each other by doing so. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can advance our collective understanding. That's what matters about writing. That's what matters about the press, and above all, about the open forum of the U.S. Naval Institute Proceedings. Thank you very much, and thank you for this honor, Pete.
We'll press on here, rogue slides and all. I also want to mention a couple of important passages. This week, Bob Johnson, who served as our Chief Financial Officer for 12 years, has retired, and he's done a superb job. And Bob's not here with us tonight because he had a big family event before he moved south. But he's been, unlike a lot of CFOs I know, in that he was a complete partner to the staff and a man of unquestioned integrity and well respected by the staff. And he gave me, as CEO, 100% support and loyalty, and he delivered clean audits each and every year. So we wish Bob Johnson the very best in retirement, and also welcome his relief, Chip Wallen. And Chip joins us with a superb background. He's a graduate of UVA and William and Mary. Maybe most importantly, though, he has a son who's a sophomore, a third class at the Naval Academy. Chip, welcome, and thank you again. Okay. So last year we had a very long brief, and I tried to tell you everything I knew about the strategic plan. And we're just going to pick just a few topics. I'm going to get off the stage and get to the recognition part of our program. But I thought it'd be useful just to dive in on a couple things, because we are downrange on all the objectives of our 2016 to 2018 strategic plan, but I'd like to hit a few highlights to illustrate our progress. We said in the plan that we would tee up important topics and increase the dare. We said we'd advance the vitality, the relevance, the edginess, and also establish an online persona for proceedings. So what have we done? Well, we've done a complete change out of the editorial staff. We've added, Captain Retired Dave Adams, Captain Retired Bill Hamblett, Julie Ulver as the managing editor. We have increased the dare factor, and we've increased the number of important issues that we're covering in each month's magazine, and almost 70% of our authors right now are running as active duty authors, so we're very happy with that. We've improved our editing and changed the look. We have an all-new graphics staff, and we've rolled out Proceedings Today. And Proceedings Today is a little tricky because, we had the journalistic effort in USNI News, and we had the normal commentary that you've had for many years in Proceedings. And we said, we really should have the commentary in Proceedings, but it was difficult with the tyranny of the cycle of a monthly magazine to cover topics in a timely fashion. So now we've rolled out Proceedings Today. We did that starting about 10 days ago, and we've already had a few of the articles get picked up in the aggregators and the clipping services, and so far we're doing very well with it. We do see a time down the way where we will, when we get to the new format with our website rollout in January, our website update, that there'll just be one Proceedings. The today will fade away. But for the time being, Proceedings Today, check it out. There was an article in the Clips today that was done by Sandy Winnefeld and Jim Miller on bringing back nuclear tomahawks, and it was a very thoughtful piece. Next up. So this slide is all about the expanded engagement for active duty members. The essays are up to about 600 essay entrants a year. So we're really amping this up. And we see us arriving at a point where, if you look at the Naval Academy, they graduate about 1,000, give or take, folks every year, commissioned officers. And if you look at ROTC, it's about 1,000, OCS about 1,000. And we'd like to have about 1,000 people graduate from our essay contest every year, and we're well on our way. CNO asked us to look at a contest that was focused on Navy history, some specific aspects of it, and the Institute raised our hand to do it, and General Dynamics helped us sponsor it. Engagement starts early. You could see in the pictures here, UVA NROTC units signing up for membership, plebes from the Naval Academy visiting Beach Hall. What a concept. And looking at reef points. We don't usually admit to them that we publish reef points, which we've done since 1905, but we try to de-emphasize that normally with the MIDs. We also, as part of our engagement activities, we've we've hired a new membership and marketing professional, Carolina Olivieri. She's replacing Joe Plensler, who moved on to be the national spokesman for the American Legion, and we're very happy to have Carolina on board. And we also have welcomed our new director for outreach, who's NIP author Ward Carroll, who has just joined us, and we welcome Ward on board. This next one should be USNI News. There we go. After a year of explosive growth with USNI News, we're on track to reach even more readers in 2017. After 1 year, just the YouTube channel associated with USNI News has grown tremendously. We've gone from 0 to about 3.5 million views on our YouTube channel that's associated with USNI News. And we measure this, I call this the Barbara Starr rule. We have our own desk at the Pentagon now for USNI News, so that's very cool. Increasingly, USNI News is cited as a source, and maybe illustrative is the Carl Vinson story. You're all familiar with the Where's Waldo Carl Vinson story that happened a couple weeks ago, but I thought it was important that the Washington Post wrote an article about the confusion about Carl Vinson. And they basically said, well, one group did get it right, and it was USNI News. And the Military Times also wrote a very similar piece. It was nice to get that credit. It's nice to be cited as a source, and nice to be cited as a credible source. In our plan, and we cycle to the next slide. There we go. In our plan, we've challenged ourselves to share the excitement. And we're moving to bring naval history to a younger readership while keeping faith with our loyal readers. And we have some new departments in Naval History Magazine, the Blue Jackets Manual section, As I Recall section, and an Acts of Valor section, which will be in graphic novel format. This graphic is from the Bridge of Dong Ha NIP graphic novel that's in production. And we have 9 of these in the works, and we'll be rolling these out in the Q3 of next year. And we're going to have to be very careful about this because, one man's graphic novel is another man's comic book. But we find that it's a very efficient and effective means of storytelling. And the numbers on these are fantastic. Successful graphic novels and graphic histories on the outside have print runs of 50, 60,000. And if you told me 5 years ago that young people would want printed books in this format, at those numbers, you could have won a lot of money off me. But in fact, that's something that's important to us, less for the potential for book income and more for the reason of you've got to meet people where they are. And this is where they are. Next. Okay, we continue to capture, we've just got a couple more slides. We continue to capture more primary source history to bring it to a broader audience. We've expanded the number of historians that we have. For many years we had Dr. Mason and then of course Paul Stilwell, and both of them are icons in their field. But now we've got many more historians working on a variety of projects. So right now, if you compare to 5 years ago, we were doing 1 or 2 oral histories a year. Now we're doing 15 right now. We have 15 in progress. So that's important. I mentioned last year that we had digitized the oral history tapes, and it's important. I mean, some of these subjects, we have 30 to 40 hours of them speaking in their own voice about their lives, their careers, and on many topics that maybe even go beyond just their career. And recently, we had young Lieutenant Jack McCain come over, and we were able to hand him 30 hours of tape of his grandfather, and it's the first time he really heard his grandfather's voice. And it hit home to him. That was a wow. And so, we have over 300 of these. And I also have noticed that there are things that are said on the tape sometimes that are not in the transcript. And often those things are personal stories or something about their family, about how something was affecting them at the time. And so the family connection is very cool. I want to note here the contribution of Dennis Clift, who we've chained to our archive. And Dennis Clift has done incredible work, not just to read all the proceedings articles, but to sift through all the oral histories, and he's pulling out these gems, and we're putting them up on our website, but little tape excerpts of things that were going on. And you hear people like Admiral McDonald talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis or the Bay of Pigs and his reaction to President Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and what it was like to be in that room. And you really feel it, and it's good. Just shifting, we've rolled out a memoir program. We know that we're not the only people to go after memoirs, but we looked at the number of people that were bringing us memoirs, and our answer for many years really was just no. Hey, I haven't asked the question yet. No. It used to be like when you're on the ship and you call the dispersing office. And if you called the dispersing office, they'd answer the phone and it'd be no. And it said, I haven't asked the question yet. And they said, where did you call, sir? The dispersing office. No. So we were that way about the memoir program. We just said, well, we don't do floors, we don't do windows, we don't do memoirs. And so we thought, upon further review, we said we really need to offer more in this area, and it's important to service this. And so we're serving a broader community. It's the right thing to do. It's the best thing to do. We've already had many populate in. We've announced it, and people are bringing those memoirs. And we're also in the process of finding little gems around the Naval Institute, like we found General Genda's speech from 1969, where General Genda came to the Naval Institute and gave a speech that was very controversial, because in one of the Q's and A's they asked him, what about the bomb and what's your feeling about the U.S. employing nuclear weapons? And General Genda, in a fit of honesty, said, if the Japanese had a nuclear weapon, we would have dropped it on the United States. But that whole transcript is, sitting in a file drawer. And now we'll put that on the memoir. We're going to throw some more logs on the fire. But we don't want them lost in an attic or a basement. Next slide. And here I'm at the end of these illustrative examples. The tech transformation, I won't bore you with this too much, except to tell you that we're halfway through the transformation we talked about last year to preserve, store, and access the content that we produce. And we've digitized, as you know, all our proceedings. They're word searchable back to 1874, Naval History Magazine, all the oral histories, all the tapes, as we just discussed. And now we're tackling the image library. And this was daunting because we have 450,000 some images, but we identified that there was probably about 180,000 that we needed to get to as a priority. And we've already digitized 40,000 of them. And as you all know from your military experiences out there and your corporate experiences out there, that it's even more daunting to associate the data with the photo and the metadata tagging and all the rigor that has to go with that. So we have these interns who are library science. Many of them are graduate students. Some have their degree already in library information science. They're working away in our library in Beach Hall, and I've been so impressed with their efforts, and they've done just a terrific job. The power is knowing what the image really is, not just having a scanned image. And we're on track to be able to summon on demand all we know about a topic in proceedings, plus oral history, plus naval history, and the images sometime late next year. And so the next major milestone is January 2018, when we'll have all the storage, access, and production elements in place. So that's it. I'll stop there. I won't try to go through everything, but I also wanted to offer, if there's any questions on any particular item, anything to do with the Institute, about what it's doing, why it's doing it, membership aspects, dues, anything. This audience is great. Wait. Peg Klein.
So thanks so much for just hitting the wave tops. What would you say, what's out there on the horizon that you haven't gotten to yet that you think is really important?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'd say one of the ones that we have in our plan that we're very excited about, and I didn't talk about, that I think is important, is I think we need a home field for the Naval Institute to have a meeting like this. And you can come to CSIS, you can go to the museum like we do for Defense Forum Washington, but where are we doing the writers' workshops? Where are we doing author presentations? Where are we getting a place within Beach Hall where we can have a whole company of midshipmen come and hear, Norman Polmar talk about Project Azorian? We don't have that because we built Beach Hall to be the headquarters and the production, but not the place where we do engagement. And I think we need that. So one of the very exciting things that's on the horizon, Peg, as an example, is we think we need to build a conference center at Beach Hall. We're in very serious discussions with the Navy. They're almost Panmunjom-like negotiations with the U.S. Navy. But we're close. They were very thrilled. They asked me, these civil engineers and all the NAVFAC and scenic people who do this, said, Admiral, who at the Naval Institute is going to be the action officer on this project? And I said, well, I am. And they were thrilled. And we have these discussions, and we're making great progress. So I think that's one that's out there, Peg, like the next thing that we should do. Thank you. Sir. Yes, sir. I don't think we have a mic there, right behind you.
Okay, thank you. I think the Naval Institute also can be aware of things happening outside the Institute that are very much related. I was delighted to see Grace Hopper's picture on the screen just a short time ago. And you may know that fairly recently, Yale University decided to rename one of its residential colleges, and following the general movement of downplaying people famous for their role in the Confederacy, they renamed Calhoun College Grace Hopper College. And I think that is emblematic, but certainly not unique, among the recognitions of the, naval officer contributions to the intellectual quality of American life in general. The Naval Institute is certainly emblematic of that sort of thing, but I think it should also try to be very much aware of things like this outside the Institute that boosts the Institute's mission.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, sir. Agree. We won't talk about the fact that a third of the Charles F. Adams class destroyers were named for Confederates, or several of the SSBNs in the George Washington class. We'll leave that out. So, sir, in the back.
Thank you. Admiral, retired Captain Marty Menez. Last year, some content was made available. It happened to be about the Navy Reserve's birthday celebration. Mm-hmm. But it was only made available on an Apple iPad, only. And after investigation, I finally gave up trying to get it through any other means. Are we still captive to an outside organization technologically?
No, and thanks for highlighting that. We tried to use the Apple Store for a while. It was an experiment, and you know, I have to call that one a fail. I'm a big believer that you got to try and occasionally fail, and I admit that that one didn't go well. But so that taught us a lot, and you're absolutely spot on that irritated a lot of people that they had to go through Apple to get to that product. So agree with your comments and would tell you that I think we've learned from that. Other questions? Okay. One more here, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Nathan Byen, Commander, retired life member. How would one go about donating to the Institute an historic item?
Did you say, how would I go about donating?
Yes.
See that guy right back there? No, Kirk McAlexander, who...
Historic item.
I'm sorry. No, the answer is that probably the best place to enter, you could send me an email or get in touch with Janice Jorgensen, who really runs our library and archive. And we get calls like this quite frequently, and we welcome that. So I think Janice Jorgensen, who's here. Janice, where are you tonight? Janice, right over here. And Janice, would you meet up with this gentleman here and or send me something? Thank you.
Actually, I can show you tonight if you want to.
Okay.
Right here.
I see Tom Clancy's book there.
Well, it's more than that, actually.
Okay,
Much
I look
more.
forward to it, sir. Thank you. Okay, well, I think we'll cut it. I think we'll cut questions here and get on with the rest of our program. And I want to thank all our members who came out today in this naval weather and came here and spent this time with us tonight. And I call up Naval Institute Press Director Rick Russell for the first award presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Admiral Daly. I'm Rick Russell, Director of the Naval Institute Press, and it's my honor and pleasure to announce the winner of the Press Author of the Year Award. This year's winner is Colonel William Reeder, Jr., United States Army retired, for Through the Valley, My Captivity in Vietnam, which was published in April 2016. 45 years ago, almost to the day, in May 1972, Captain Reeder was on his second combat tour in Vietnam when his AH-1 Cobra attack helicopter was shot down. Though grievously wounded, including a broken back and burns, he evaded the enemy for 3 days. When he was captured finally, he was the last serviceman taken prisoner in South Vietnam during that war. Through the Valley is his masterfully written personal account of his grueling captivity and survival. It's a page-turner. Bill's not only a legendary aviator, he's in the Aviation Hall of Fame, he's a captivating storyteller. And he also has a PhD in history. It's one of our guys. The result is an often harrowing tale, but also inspiring for its representation of courage and sacrifice. It's a significant contribution to our understanding of the American military experience and the cost of sending men and women into battle. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bill Reeder. I don't think I'm supposed to give you this right now. I think so. You get this very great medal. There we go. Sorry about that. There we go. Yeah.
Rick, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I am indeed, as you can imagine, humbled at this recognition here this afternoon. I had a story in my heart that I needed to tell, and the Naval Institute Press made that possible, and I will be forever grateful. Thank you. 45 years ago, I was shot down on the 9th of May 1972, and I evaded the enemy for 3 days, 9th, 10th, 11th. I was captured today, exactly 45 years ago. I needed to tell this story, not mainly because it was my story, in fact, that stood in the way for a while, but because there has been so much written about POWs and the terrible ordeal that all those suffered who were shot down and captured in North Vietnam. But very little had been written about the experience of those prisoners who were captured in the South and in Laos. So that was the story that I really wanted to tell through my experience and through those who I met during my captivity. I have to thank Susan Brooke so much, because none of this would have happened without her and her confidence in my manuscript and allowing that to go forward and making this publication possible. And then I also have to thank Claire Noble and Robin Noonan and the entire marketing staff for all that they have done, their extraordinary work in making this book the success that it is. So again, with humility, I thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Latour, Editor-in-Chief of Naval History Magazine. Commander Alan Zim, the 2016 Naval History Author of the Year, joined the Navy in 1973 after graduating with a degree in physics from UCLA. Among his numerous contributions to proceedings is a 1982 professional note about the missile-armed hydrofoil Pegasus, in which he had served as executive officer. 17 years later, his article, Human-Centric Warfare, won the Naval Institute's Arleigh Burke Essay Contest, what's now known as the General Prize Essay Contest. By that time, Commander Zim had retired from the Navy, was a senior professional staffer with the Joint Theater Analysis Group at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. But how did a physicist become a historian? While working on a presentation years ago, Commander Zim sought to compare the accuracy of modern precision weapons with bomber hit rates at Pearl Harbor, but he couldn't find the rates in books about the attack. So he went back to the original sources, crunched the numbers that he found, and discovered that the rates were much less than one would expect from the accolades given to the attack. Further research and analysis resulted in his 2011 book, Attack on Pearl Harbor: Strategy, Combat, Myths, Deceptions. 5 years later, when I was planning the issue of Naval History commemorating the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, I contacted Commander Zim about contributing an article. In his reply email, which began, "As a matter of finely tuned coincidence," he told me how he had prepared a series of articles about the strike that contained new and unpublished material, and I was welcome to select what I wished to use. That turned out to be Commander Fashida's decision, which earned the Commander Author of the Year honors. The provocative article explains how Commander Mitsu Fashida, leader of the first wave of Japanese bombers and fighters on 7 December, purposely fired 2 flares from his plane to signal his pilots to use what turned out to be a flawed, no-surprise attack plan. This was despite all signs that they had achieved complete surprise. The author then describes how Commander Fashida's decision to fire 2 flares resulted in a much less devastating attack. It's my honor to introduce the 2016 Naval History Author of the Year, Commander Alan Zim.
Solid gold, right? Thank you. So about a year ago, Richard sends me an email, and he says, "Would you like to write an article on Pearl Harbor?" Now, you got to understand what something like that means to an author. It's like walking into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the curator rushes up to you and says, "If you like something, go ahead and take it home." So I proposed a series, and I sent him off, I think it was 14 possible articles, 14,000 words. Somehow he did not pick up the article on how the Japanese fusing had problems with fusing on their 250 kilogram general purpose bombs, 900 words, just didn't make it. But he did take the first 3 articles I had put together, condensed them, took the introduction, edited them, took a call out and put that on the side in the article also, and also did some historical research, and he was able to track down the fate of 2 of the Japanese participants in the attack that I had not been able to find. So I've got 3 people I need to thank here tonight. First is the Naval Institute for this very prestigious honor. Thank you very much. Second is Richard Latour, who is my vote for Editor of the Year. And the last one has got to be my wife, Deborah, sitting there. For 30 years now, I've been sitting in the living room, staring out the window with a blank expression on my face, and she has accepted my explanation that I was working. Thank you all.
My name is Fred Rainbow. Pete's already established that I'm older than dirt. I'm in my 2nd tour as the editor of proceedings, and it is the best job anybody could ever have. Everybody working on the proceedings staff gets the opportunity to work with outstanding people. I got to work with the admiral when he was a midshipman, and I got to work with Sandy Winnefeld when he was a midshipman at Georgia Tech. But we talk about these folks, we had a counterpart in the Marine Corps. I've called Frank Hoffman 150 times. He's answered the phone 150 times. He is our author of the year this year. He could have been our author of the year 25 years. So Frank Hoffman, please come forward, be recognized as a force for good.
Very short remarks, 4 thank yous. I'd like to thank Admiral Stavridis, particularly. You've set the bar very high for those of us who want to live the life of the mind, who want to dare and to write, and for walking the walk and talking the talk. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Admiral Daly and the Naval Institute for what you've done for the profession and what you've done for our naval community writ large. I'd like to thank the press in general and all the staff, the other Fred, Thomas, Judith, Paul, everybody for all you do for us. But I particularly like to thank Fred, who I have had, I think, a 22-year relationship with now, who has been a gentle editor of my wonderful prose, an excellent mentor, and a very, very dear friend. So I thank you, Fred. And finally, I'd like to thank my wife, Kay. Behind every prolific author is a much neglected but appreciated spouse. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Adams, the Deputy Editor of Proceedings. It is my great pleasure to announce the winners of our General Prize Essay Contest. As you know, it's our longest running and most prestigious essay contest. Winners have included then Commander Alfred Thayer Mahan, Lieutenants Chester Nimitz and Ernest King, and all the way through hundreds of successful authors to Lieutenant Commander James Stavridis. The winner of the 3rd prize goes to a warrior helicopter pilot, professor at the Naval Academy, author of 2 books with the Naval Institute Press, for his essay on Hard to Lee, New Naval Priorities in a Multipolar World, where he argues that the Navy needs to shift its rudder and match our priorities to the world that is actually out there today. Congratulations to Commander Benjamin B.J. Armstrong. The second prize winner is a true naval professional. He couldn't be here today because he's the Pacific Fleet's intelligence officer, and he's a prolific author in proceedings, Dale Relog, on his terrific article on how the Navy needs to work on its culture and ensure if the bubble goes up, every commander can act on commander's intent and not wait for orders from above. So we congratulate Dale on second prize winning on Act on Commander's Intent. And our first prize winner is a surface warfare officer, Lieutenant Daniel Stefanis. His father's here with him today from Missouri to accept the first prize for his essay, Embracing the Dark Battle, Electronic Warfare, Distributed Lethality, and the Future of Naval Warfighting, where he talks about how the Navy must be able to fight in the electromagnetic realm or lose the next battle. Congratulations, Daniel.
First, I want to thank the U.S. Naval Institute, the Crawford Family Foundation for sponsoring the prize, my parents, and most of all my grandfather, who brainwashed me at the ripe age of 3 to love the Navy more than just about anything else. 3 years ago today, I graduated from Duke University. 2 years ago today, I deployed for the first time. And in 3 days, I'll deploy for a third time. So this week of May means quite a lot to me. It's been surreal, and being up here is absolutely awesome. When I commissioned, I made a list of goals, and at the top of that list was winning this article contest. It seemed impossible, especially as an ensign, just starting the path to this golden swope in, but I've never believed in dreaming small. I was and remain dedicated to the idea that a powerful, well-researched, and persuasive message can change the world, as unsexy as that may be in this day and age. This fall, I picked up the pen again on my second deployment, forcing myself to write and edit this essay each night after watch, making something like 25 drafts. And with each cull of words, I was able to hone more and more in on my beliefs about the future of the dark battle and naval tactics. I believe we must be shaken out of the notion that we are the inevitable naval hegemon. Our position as the keystone of a global system of alliances rests upon our ability to have maritime superiority in almost every corner of the world. But to retain that position, we must be creating, not reacting to, new tactical paradigms. Not only has our superiority been tested, but in the coming years, it will be more and more contested. I was once told by a captain that we'd have to lose destroyers to change the Navy. I hope that's not the case. I hope that ships don't have to sink in order for us to redefine the way we fight and admit that we have significant capability shortfalls, most notably electronic warfare. Electronic warfare needs more champions at higher levels. Access to the spectrum is the linchpin of our communications and our warfighting, and that's why I wanted to take this chance to speak to you, a group of incredibly impressive and accomplished people, gatekeepers of opportunity, who can bring about change and ensure our continued dominance. We have the time to correct our course. I firmly believe that we must craft a much more spectrum-savvy fleet and return to a decentralized structure in which commander's intent, warfighter innovation, and ship autonomy are not only valued, but seen as essential. Electronic warfare needs more clout. Without it, we will lose destroyers, we will lose sailors, and we will lose battles. If anyone in this room is interested in the dark battle and all these ideas, I would love to talk to you afterwards. Thank you, and God bless our Navy.
Well, what an extraordinary group of winners, really running the spectrum of youth to seniority, of height, all different kinds. They all look tall to me. I think we covered all the services. Really a terrific, terrific group, and I just add my congratulations. Please join me in a final round of applause for all of those winners. Yeah. As is traditional at our annual meeting, we ask an important individual to come and give a talk to convey a sense of what's happening in the Navy on a particular slice that they choose. And I'm very proud today that we have the Acting Secretary of the Navy with us, my friend Sean Stackley. Sean's a 79 graduate of Annapolis. He had a superb career, became a civilian in '05. I think I got to know him first back in the times of Sean O'Keefe being Secretary of the Navy, I recall. He has been at the absolute heart of delivering steel to the Navy for the last 8 years. Nothing that sails the sea, goes under the ocean, or flies through the sky has not benefited from what he did as Assistant Secretary of the Navy at RDA. He is an extraordinary, selfless, non-ego-driven asset to our nation and a wonderful acting secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Stackley.
Well, thanks, Admiral. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to join you all right now. The dark battle. Where did yeah, there's a different dark battle that goes on at the Pentagon every day. We could use your assistance there. I do want to thank first Pete Daly for the invitation. Pete made the mistake. I asked him, well, what would you like me to talk about? He says, whatever you want. So bear with me a little bit. But I saw Secretary Ignatius. Oh, there we are. It's great to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you. And Secretary O'Keefe, and I know Gordon England was here earlier. And equally important, a lot of familiar and friendly faces. Dan Bolo sitting next to Bill Tody. I hope you guys, well, I'll swap some stories with you later separately. But this is a good opportunity to share some thoughts. And what I'd like to do is kind of keep my remarks fairly tight and leave time for questions and answers and probe what's on you all's mind. I thought I'd start, I mentioned to Pete, so you know, before I show up, I really need to get the most recent copy of proceedings and make sure I'm well read on it. And before I did that, I was home and I grabbed another copy. I was looking for the proceedings with the Arleigh Burke blazing through the sea on her sea trials, and I came across a different one that I thought I would share with you. This is January 1990, and on the cover, the bold print on the cover is carriers are the wrong targets. Okay. So then I got my May copy of proceedings, carrier on the cover, too big to sink. All right, so now I went through this, and I'm going to go through it because there's a point here in terms of U.S. Naval Institute and the proceedings and the value it brings. Just going to start to march through the articles. The first article I came across was the submarine force. New target for the submarine force. This is 1990, and it's talking about the wall has fallen, what are we going to do with our submarines? And it starts to look forward into what role our submarines will play in the future. Advanced SEAL delivery systems. Hey, you know what? These might make a good land attack platform. Let's start thinking about how we're going to employ Tomahawks on board. They might play a role in irregular warfare by collecting, as an ISR platform, by collecting intel. 1990. And of course, there's there must be an article on Mahan. So the maritime strategy is not new. We have a blend here of Julian Corbett and Alfred Thayer Mahan. The Arctic, an article on the Coast Guard's critical role in the Arctic before global warming was the story of the day, before the Navy was given $1 billion to build the next icebreaker for the Coast Guard, but forward thinking in terms of the role of not just the Coast Guard, but our national security interests in the Arctic long before, like I say, global warming was the word of the day. Then I come to one that we're dealing with right now, triad or a dyad. Okay, we're getting ready to go into the nuclear posture review where we're recapitalizing our Ohio class submarine program, which is the biggest thing the Department of the Navy has coming, while the Air Force is dealing with its recapitalization and all the challenges that means to us fiscally as well as technically in the years ahead. And of course, the Nuclear Posture Review will balance those costs against the contribution to our national security. And once again, we'll be dealing with the dyad or triad question. Just like there must always be an article on Mahan, there must always be an article on leadership. We need leaders, not technocrats. Now, I've had an assignment that's been handed to me by SecDef to take a look at the reorganization of the Department of Defense, splitting up the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology and Logistics. One arm, research and engineering, the other arm, acquisition and sustainment. And frankly, I think I applaud Congress's what they ended up with. We have to work the details, and I think John Hamre, Secretary, where's John Hamre? I saw him here earlier. Did he depart? Okay, I was going to give him huge credit for contributing to the congressional language. But we have a lot of details to work on, but one of them is picking the leaders. And for the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, the thought was, hey, we need somebody who's just really good technically. We need a technical expert. I said, we got thousands of technical experts. The one thing we do not need is a technocrat. We need somebody that's going to lead our technology for the Department of Defense. We do need leaders, not technocrats. Let me keep pressing on here. Carriers. The carriers are the wrong target. And this was the cover article. I'm just going to read a little bit here because, again, this was 1990, and we're dealing with this issue in 2017. Whenever defense budgets are discussed, whenever defense expenditures are reviewed, whenever world tensions seem to ease, someone is certain to advocate a reduction in the number of U.S. Navy aircraft carriers. Now, despite the fact that the large deck aircraft carrier has repeatedly proved itself the most versatile, potent, and flexible instrument of conventional deterrence in the world today, and as Secretary of Defense Cheney has joined Senator Ted Kennedy, other senators, by backing away from the country's long-standing goal of 15 deployable carriers. 14 now is offered as an optimistic goal. Still more worrisome are reports of plans to reduce the number to 13 or fewer. Just how can the U.S. Navy meet the country's defense commitments with that many aircraft carriers? That was raised 27 years ago. Today, if you're counting, we're at 10. And when Ford delivers here this next quarter, we'll get up to 11. And we will have to fight to stay at 11 when, if you've reviewed the force structure assessment that the CNO has reported, what we need in terms of a minimum is 12 aircraft carriers. Next article, is Brian McGrath here? Nobody asked me, but surface warfare is still eating its young. Does that sound familiar? That's Lieutenant J.G. Brian McGrath, U.S. Navy. I actually asked Tommy Roden that question about 6 months ago, and the answer is no. No, they've come a long way in terms of taking care of our junior officers in particular in terms of surface warfare Navy. But having grown up as any aviators in the room, as what the, as what we're fondly referred to as shoes, having grown up as a shoe, that was a problem back then, and I think we've come a long way. A couple more articles, and then I'll move on. Article on the budget, a defense strategy that works, and then it goes on to describe how we never quite get to that defense strategy that works because of the budget issues that we have to deal with. Now, this article talked a lot about pork, but I got to a graph in here that I kid you not. You won't be able to read this graph from where you're sitting, but this is a graph of, down here it says reality, and then there's the black line, that's the budget, And up here says plans. And these are all the plans that are north of reality. This exact chart, okay, I have in my office today. Okay, the only thing that's changed is the years at the bottom, and we've added escalation. It's the same challenge. We project budgets into the future, we plan accordingly, and then we have to deal with reality when we get out there in the out years. Norman Polmar here? Oh, okay, very good. Of course, an article by you, sir, on the Soviet Navy. And while this article is not exactly applicable now, oddly enough, that carrier that's in your article, as a Soviet carrier, is now flying a Chinese national flag. And the last article here, which is applicable, is unmanned aircraft, 1990, talking about the future of unmanned aircraft in our Navy. I didn't go searching for this. I just grabbed one off the pile looking for the Arleigh Burke article and decided to flip through this 27 years ago, and I read it last night with keen interest as though it was written last month. It says a lot about the mission of the U.S. Naval Institute and about the value of a journal like Proceedings to allow senior, experienced, as well as junior officers and naval experts to contribute to the broad thinking that this nation needs, Yesterday morning, I had the opportunity to start the day with one of your, called a counterpart organization, the Navy League, on the Hill. Navy League was recognizing Senator Reid for his contributions, and going from the Navy League yesterday, a loud voice on behalf of a strong Navy. Spent the entire day yesterday with the chairs and ranking members of armed services and appropriations committees, loud voices calling for a stronger Navy, and then today with U.S. Naval Institute, again, loud voice calling for a stronger Navy. What we've got to do is figure out, how do we get traction? How do we get traction? Pete was describing 51,000 members. Good number, 51,000 members. There's 300 million Americans. What we have got to do, and this was the message from the leadership on the Hill, is when we go to the Hill, we talk to the defense committees. There are 24 committees on the Hill. 4 of them are armed services or defense. The other 20 want our share of the federal budget. So we're actually talking, even though it feels like we're taking a beating in the course of doing it, we are talking with our strongest advocates in the Congress. What we've got to do is to ensure that not Senator McCain, because he does know, he does hear. We've got to ensure that the full 535 members of the Congress and the people they represent understand the why and wherefore that adds up to the need for a larger, stronger Navy. Now, I'll just touch briefly on the May, because I did get to the May proceedings. And again, carrier article, different perspective, okay? Different perspective, but comes back to the notion and the reality that the carriers are the centerpiece to our naval force structure. How about that? Mahan rules, okay. Article by Admiral Winnefeld, and here we have it, submarine-launched Tomahawk missiles, okay? 27 years later, Proceedings says we should think about it. Admiral Winnefeld is saying, you know what, we need to be buying more of them. And then the last one I hit on is, of course, leadership. We need 21st century Burkes, which ironically is a question I've often asked. Where's the next Arleigh Burke? Where's the next Arleigh Burke? We do need leaders, not technocrats. That's not actually what I was going to talk about today. I want to share a few thoughts. And again, Pete said talk about anything, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about history, a little bit about your Navy today, a little bit about the future, and then leave time for Q&A. This past week, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Coral Sea, the first battle at sea between opposing carrier forces, the first battle at sea where neither combatant saw the other, the earliest days of radar at sea, the earliest days of communications, intelligence, stealing signals from the enemy, and perhaps most importantly, the first of many joint Allied operations between the U.S. Navy and the Australian Navy at an event that was a turning point in Australian history. That was 75 years ago this month. 3 years later, in fact, on this day, May 11th, 1945, Marines were on Okinawa. The war in Europe had ended just days prior with Germany surrendering, but not before Germany had unleashed two weapons that they hoped would turn the tide of the war in Europe. The first was ballistic missiles, V-1 and V-2 buzz bombs, and then the first fighter jet, the Me-262 Messerschmitt. And as significant as these weapons were, they were too late to alter the outcome of that war, but clearly they've played a significant role in defense planning in the years since. And meanwhile, in the Pacific, the U.S. had introduced a fleet of aircraft carriers, a series of advanced aircraft, advanced radar, the proximity fuse, the Higgins boat, improved torpedoes, all helping turn the tide of the war in that theater. And on this day, on May 11th, off the coast of Okinawa, in its desperate final months, the Imperial force would strike the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier Bunker Hill, killing 400 sailors, and putting the carrier out of action for the remainder of the war with a weapon that, despite its significantly greater range, greater accuracy, and greater payload, would signal the end of the Imperial Empire. And that weapon, of course, was the kamikaze. In the final 10 months of the war, there would be 3,862 kamikaze attacks, with near 20% hitting their target. And in the most primitive of ways, they would be the harbinger of one of our most advanced weapons today, which is the cruise missile. Well, 3 months from that day, the U.S. would unleash its secret weapon, the atomic bomb, bringing a quick and decisive end to the war. So in sum, history that we're all well familiar with, the war brought with it an incredible expansion of technology, an incredible expansion of our fleet, and an incredible expansion of our military-industrial base. And two, the war brought with it irreversible changes to the world we live in. From Eastern Europe to the Middle East to the Korean Peninsula, new boundaries were drawn on a map. From Western Europe to India to China and Japan, new forms of government took power. And in Europe, the European Union and NATO, economic alliances were all formed. And with this backdrop, at the war's end, Admiral Ernie King submitted a report to the President titled, "The Peacetime and Wartime Navy." And it opens with the following, that if you all have time, I recommend Google the document, read it, rich in history. But the following, okay, I carry with me because I deal with it, we deal with it every day. The fundamental United States naval policy is to maintain the Navy in strength and readiness to uphold national policies and interests and to guard the United States and its continental and overseas possessions. In time of peace, when the threats to our national security change with the strength and attitude of other nations in the world who have a motive for making a war upon us and who are, or think they are, strong enough to do so, it is frequently difficult to evaluate those threats and translate our requirements into terms of ships and planes and trained men. It is one thing to say that we must have and maintain a Navy adequate to uphold national policies and interests and to protect us against potential enemies. But it is another thing to decide what is and what is not the naval strength adequate for that purpose. So to this day, from the combatant commanders to the Pentagon to Congress, one of our fundamental responsibilities, and truly one of our toughest challenges, is to decide what is and what is not the naval strength adequate to uphold national policies and guard the United States. The challenge, of course, is that that determination must always be done in the context of the national economy and under the constraints of the federal budget. So let me talk a little bit about national security strategy. We emerged from World War II, U.S. and Soviet Union were the lone dominant world powers at the war's end. We could not sustain the standing army we had at the time of 10 million in uniform, or the fleet size we had that was measured in the thousands. Building, sustaining, and fighting with a force that size consumed 45% of the gross national product, and that simply was not sustainable. There was no returning to pre-war isolationism, and so we would need to build strong global military alliances. And we held a significant technological edge over the Soviet Union, and it was imperative that we hold on to that edge. And so in 1947, we formulated a national security strategy that relied upon a technically superior force that would be engaged globally, supported by alliances in critical regions of interest. We held on to our defense laboratories that were established in the course of the war, and we went to work on advancements to the carrier, the fighter jet, nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, radar technology. From there, we made the next great leap to nuclear propulsion, surface-to-air missiles, and eventually the cruise missile. And in the decades since, we've had to manage a constant balance between the operational demands of our naval forces, the size of our Navy and Marine Corps to meet that demand, the readiness of the force, measured in terms of material condition and training, the capability measured in terms of technically superior weapon systems, and the budget. So let's fast forward to today. And what was once referred to as a two-generation lead in terms of technical superiority has given way to perhaps a one-generation lead, or in certain cases, pure head-to-head competition. And our once oversized Navy, while it is still the largest, most powerful of all the world's navies, is by all accounts smaller than it needs to be. 276 ships today. And we're on a path to reach the 300 ship goal by the end of this decade, which just a few years ago was determined adequate to meet the needs of our national maritime strategy. However, in view of increasing demand on our naval forces and the pattern and pace of growth of the competing navies, Russia and China, the CNO's recent force structure assessment calls for a 355-ship Navy in the decades ahead, with the greatest increase required in submarines, large surface combatants, and returning to a 12-carrier Navy. Now, to put the size of today's Navy in context, consider today's operations. Today, ships are in the Baltic, the Med, the Black Sea, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, the Arabian Gulf. They're off the coast of Thailand, the Philippines. They're conducting amphibious exercises today at Guam, in the South China Sea, the Sea of Japan. And that's just our surface ships. For as all you submariners know, our submarine force is wherever the waters reach around the world. So to borrow from the title of Secretary Lehman's recent editorial, the U.S. Navy must be everywhere at once. But this comes at a cost. 98 of our 276 ships are deployed today. That's more than 1 in 3. And another 52 are underway off both of our coasts, training and conducting testing. And the Marine Corps, their deployment to dwell ratio is equally stressed. And this high cost, high pace of operations has been sustained for at least 24 years, going back to the fall of the wall. And for the dozen years that I've been watching it closely, those statistics have been constant. Unfortunately, particularly since the passage of the Budget Control Act, our budget has not maintained this pace of operations. And so readiness in terms of training and maintenance has suffered. It has given way. Now, to be clear, we've continued to meet our operational commitments in terms of deployed ships, aircraft, and the Marine Air Ground Task Force, but that has come at the expense of units back home in terms of maintenance and training and in our depots, which brings me to the budget. Simply, it must grow. In the simplest of terms, our priorities in the budget are, as stated by Secretary Mattis, rebuild and reform. Rebuild. Rebuild in terms of the 2017 budget is rebuilding our readiness. It's addressing those things that have contributed to shortfalls of spare parts, of training, flying hours, steaming days, rebuild our readiness. So following the submission of the 17 budget, we went back with a request for additional appropriations. And while we didn't get everything we asked for, in fact, the Congress provided our highest, most critical needs in terms of addressing readiness. 18, it's about wholeness. It's do not give back what we gain in terms of readiness, but let's continue to press on to address our most pressing shortfalls, be it in terms of munitions, be it in terms of our parts lockers, be it in terms of our infrastructure. It's about wholeness. And in 19, we need to get on with growing and modernizing the force. And along the way, we must reform. We must reform our business practices in order to ensure that we generate the greatest amount of warfighting power we can for the taxpayers' dollars that we've been entrusted with. Reform. Now, I have to be careful not to get too far out ahead of the process. The 2018 budget request, we are going to be careful to hold on to the gains we've made in readiness. We didn't get here in 1 year, and we're not going to emerge from this in a single year. We do need to press on with those wholeness needs, filling those munitions and that infrastructure and addressing those shortfalls. But we have to recognize that a key factor in terms of readiness is the size of the force. You cannot be sustaining a greater than 1 in 3 deployment ratio for your ships and expect that you're going to be able to maintain the readiness back home. You need time back home to do that, and that comes with a greater force size. So when people hear rebuild, reform, the reform side, there is a tendency to just think about the business side of the equation, but it's far more than that. Reform is time and money. It's time and money. We have got to reduce the time it takes in terms of developing and fielding those advanced capabilities that underpin our national security strategy. There's a time element that we've got to go after, and we're going after that. We're going after that, fortunately, with the support of Congress. I mentioned earlier some of the changes that Congress has instituted in terms of the division of the Undersecretary for Acquisition Technology and Logistics. The principal element of that is to raise the prominence of research and engineering to be able to drive technical dominance back into our thinking, back into our calculus, to build the capabilities that we need going forward. That's about time as much as it is about capability. So I'll leave you with just a short list in terms of those technologies as we look ahead that we, the Navy, as well as the broader Department of Defense, have to be investing in to drive that technical superiority that we're depending on going forward. Unmanned. Today's budget, we have the first fixed-wing unmanned aircraft laid into the budget. This has been a long time coming. I've probably spent 4 to 5 years inside of the building trying to get a program outside of the building in terms of unmanned off our carriers. And today we're moving forward with that. Operationally resilient space, stealth, electromagnetic maneuver warfare, directed energy, hypersonics, broader links, smarter weapons, greater computational power, artificial intelligence. Because long before we arrive at a 355-ship Navy, which is in the decades ahead, we'll need to bring these technologies, these capabilities to the force to give a smaller fleet the punch that we're going to rely upon to make up for our shortfall in terms of numbers in the fight. So those are my thoughts that I'll leave you with today. I would like to turn over to you all to see what's on your mind, and we could turn this into a hearing. It's about the right ratio, and address any questions that you have. Please.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Zach George. I'm a reserve lieutenant, did 6 years active duty, and I serve in the reserve component, but I'm also an analyst at the Office of Naval Intelligence. And seeing both the fleet side and now the intel side, I feel that the United States Navy puts too much out there in our capabilities. We broadcast too much what we do. Studying other threat countries now, they're hard targets for us to find out new programs where the U.S. Navy, it's coming out in a press leak or a senior officer says something, or the SM-6 now we know shoots in surface mode. So is there to maintain our superiority, is there any way to kind of keep our cards closer to our chest as we did in the 60s and 70s instead of putting it all out there?
You are singing my tune. Okay, I couldn't agree with you more. I start my day by opening up the early bird just to see what's going to surprise me next. What you're describing is my concern. It's the Secretary of Defense. More importantly, it's the Secretary of Defense's concern. It's the CNO's concern. We have been far too forward-leaning in terms of advertising what we are doing, frankly, to give advance warning to the threat, whoever that happens to be. And we have to be far more guarded about that. Secretary Mattis basically instructed the department and informed the Congress, because the Congress is a part of this. Congress is trying to draw information out in a public forum to support a budget mark. It's like, we will give you the information that we owe you, that you deserve, that you need. But if it's classified, if it's even leaning in that direction, we'd like to give it to you behind closed doors, because we share too much. Frankly, much of our, the 2 generation to 1 generation to head, much of that, the loss of our lead has been by exfiltration of some of our technical data. And so there's a cyber war that we need to be more aggressive about in terms of protecting our information, but there's also a public dissemination issue. And so our policy, it's probably fairly recent in terms of the Department of the Navy, is to have far better control of the information that we're promulgating. We owe the public, and we owe the Congress, but we also owe our sailors and Marines. And so we need to be able to discern what belongs in the press versus what belongs behind closed doors.
Thank you, sir.
You should write an article in Proceedings about that. That was way too easy.
Hi, Sidney Friedberg,
how are you
Breaking
doing?
Defense. Hi.
I haven't seen you since Sierra Space, Sidney.
Yeah. I still exist, and even though I'm a reporter, I will not ask you about the gag policy because we find out anyway. But let me ask about the ATL reform.
I told you at Sierra Space there is no gag policy, but keep going.
Yes, but you sound very enthusiastic about that.
I'm very enthusiastic.
I know there's concern, Mr. Kendall and others, that this may split things up that need to be kept together. In particular, it may aggravate the valley of death, since you have R&D on one side and the actual large-scale procurement on the other. So how do you avoid throwing babies out with the bathwater and keep that handoff going while still getting the separate focused organizations that you want?
Yeah, let me go back to this article. We need leaders, not technocrats. I am very enthusiastic about this change. The AT&L and Frank Kendall in particular has done tremendous things in terms of getting cost under control, driving discipline into our systems, providing Congress with predictable performance, and that has been all to the good, all to the good. It's resulted in freeing up dollars that go towards additional warfighting capability. What Congress is pointing at is, in this period, we have been losing our edge, our advantage in terms of technical superiority. And so the split up between R&E and A&S is as much about elevating, putting a priority on that development activity, identifying the technologies that we need to be pressing on, identifying the technologies that the threat is pressing on, going through and taking risk in the development phases to figure out what works and what doesn't work, so that when we go into procurement, in fact, what we've done is we've retired the risk. First, we've picked the right technology. We've retired the risk for that technology. And then we can march into procurement with far greater understanding of the cost, far greater understanding of the schedule that's going to be required to field it, and deliver capability faster to the force. I'm very enthusiastic about it. Now, it does come with risk. It does come with risk because we have a process that's been honed over decades. And what we have to recognize is that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to the process. Congress has given us a green field in terms of moving outside of the tried and true defense acquisition system, which was configured for certain major weapon systems, but not necessarily all. They want us to take greater advantage of commercial technology. They want us to tailor our processes. They want us to come in at different milestones so we can not have to start at pre-milestone A when in fact we've identified mature technologies that are near ready to go to production. They want to give us the ability, the flexibility to tailor the system the way it is today. So the management across R&E and A&S, that's a leadership issue. That's a leadership issue. The challenges that we're dealing with regarding the threat, those are technical issues today. We've got to overcome those technical challenges. I applaud the move that Congress has made to do that. It's an opportunity for us. We have to take advantage of it to frankly share the concerns that were provided by the Hill. They put it very succinctly. We believe that the risk of not doing this, the risk of not raising the preeminence of research and engineering inside the Department of Defense, that risk is far greater than the risk that all these bright minds in the Department of Defense, that the risk that they will not be able to overcome a seam in their organization. And I agree with them. Okay. We got one more.
I think this microphone over here works. Megan Eckstein with USNI News. We got to hear a little bit last week about your plans to redo the requirements process for the future frigate. And I was wondering if you could just describe a little bit the mentality that led up to the idea of kind of throwing the competition more wide open with, beyond just the two hull forms that previously were competing, whether that idea came from the Pentagon or internal to the Navy. And then also it sounds like this requirements process will have more time and potentially fewer cost constraints. So I wondered how the process might be different than back in 2014.
Let me refute a couple things. Not more time and not fewer cost constraints, okay? What motivated this, frankly, the CNO staff went through a force structure assessment and took a look at the future world, the world that we will be operating in, and determined that while the frigate that came out of the 2014 study, its multi-mission capabilities are right, we need more. We need more in terms of capabilities. And the more that we're looking at is added air defense capability, added elements of electronic warfare capability, added survivability, and we're looking at things like endurance. So yes, we are looking at more, however, cost matters. And there will be a forced trade of capabilities based on cost, and time does matter too. We're not going to throw this open to a clean sheet design. We don't need a clean sheet design. We have a number of mature designs, US and foreign. And so we don't need to develop a new platform. What we need to do is identify the mature weapon systems that we want to put on an existing mature platform, and the challenge then becomes, are we ready to integrate? Okay, and then looking at all the standard naval architecture, weight and KGL, this sort of thing, okay? But bottom line, mature platforms, mature weapon systems, we're doing trades in terms of capabilities to go after what I described, added air defense capability, added electronic warfare, survivability. Cost matters. CNO is going to determine what's affordable. We'll draw that line, we'll make those trades. We're going to leverage the maturity of the design so that we can get at what we need in terms of speed of fielding that capability. And then why open it up? when we did the study in 2014, we were looking at different budget constraints and different requirements in terms of the force structure assessment of the day. When you open up the capability, you move away from the existing mods that we were looking at strictly for an LCS hull, and now you really do have to go and make it full and open competition. So, all right. Thank you, Pete.
Secretary Stackley, we thank you for your time. We know you're a busy man. We have 2 Naval Institute books for you. First, our Naval Institute Press Author of the Year book from Bill Reeder, Through the Valley, My Captivity in Vietnam.
Excellent.
And that's one.
Thank you.
And we have one other, which is a Leader's Bookshelf by our Chair of the Board, Admiral Stavridis. But this book is one of our hot ones right now, and we also want you to have this, both of which are a token of our appreciation. They don't cover the time that you gave us here today, which is precious. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay, so I thank our sponsors one more time for their support. We can't do it without them. We had USAA and Leonardo, DRS, and we appreciate very much their support. And we also want to thank our members. The Naval Institute is at its heart an open forum, a coalition of the willing of members who believe in our mission. And we thank you for coming out. We thank you for your engagement, your interest, and invite you to join us across the way here at the reception, and look forward to talking to many of you. Thank you. This ends our 144th annual meeting.